Hello, hello! We love investing in biotech because of the crazy rallies it can have. But we also run into those brutal 90% drops. Can we avoid them? In this video we are going to learn how to avoid those bullets. Stay with me, this taxi is starting up! Welcome to Taxi Biotech, a show to keep up with the latest news and updates from the world of biotechnology and to learn about its impact on the stock market. The stock data I present here is just a reflection of how companies or their clinical trials are progressing and does not constitute any investment recommendation. This is purely for entertainment. This week, 3 companies have crashed more than 80%. Let's see what happened to them and we can learn from it. Let's start with MoonLake Therapeutics, which dropped 90% this week. MoonLake develops drugs for dermatological condition, and its phase 3 trial failed to reach statistical significance on one of its key endpoints. That's why the stock dropped this 90%. Previously, in 2023, they released excellent phase 2 result, and the stock jumped more than 138% to new highs here. Right before this latest crash, it was again at record levels, and then came the disastrous data. I'm not going to dive into the scientific results here. Instead, let's see if we could have predicted this crash. The best comment I found on Twitter came from Adam, a guy who gets a lot of hate there in Twitter, but we don't care about that here in this channel. We use whatever's useful, right? So back in June, he wrote about Merck's $3 billion offer to acquire MoonLake, which the company rejected. At first glance, rejecting such an offer might sound like confidence. Maybe they believe their data would be great. But Adam saw it differently. He said this was actually bad news ahead, that they were trying to artificially inflate the stock price because something ugly was coming. He also explained why he thought the drug would fail compared to the currently approved therapy, pointing to issues like placebo response and the statistical design based on reducing inflamed nodules in the skin. As always, I'll leave the links down in the description or in the comment box. I found this comment really interesting, that a rejected buyout offer can actually be a sign of weakness, and how Adam compared the placebo performance of the approved drug versus MoonLake's and extrapolated the likely failure of their own trial based on those differences and the statistical endpoints they choose. 2 valuable lessons in this tweet to keep in mind. And now let's move to Kala Bio, which dropped 91%. That kind of hit destroys any portfolio. Kala focused on treatments for corneal defects, and the reason for the disaster was its phase 2 trial failed to meet its primary endpoints. The key question here is, could we have seen it coming before the bad results came out? Well, in their August 8th press release, they already mentioned they would soon announce their final phase 2 results, so it wasn't a surprise. Looking at the chart here, things look pretty good before the data release. The market clearly expected positive results. From August, the stock climbed from $7 to $20. However, we can also spot a sharp drop in February here, which was time for a change of CEO, and for many investors that's a big red flag. Let's take a quick look at the scientific data. They presented this data from their phase 1 trial. Notice that since then, in 2023, there haven't been any new data releases. The only results they ever shared came from a single arm study, meaning there was no placebo group. In that trial, 6 out of 8 patients show improvements in their eyes. So, yes, the numbers look great. And honestly, people on Twitter were pretty optimistic about it. You can see in these example images that the cornea is getting better after the days, but there is no placebo group to compare it. So, let's take a lesson from this one. Be careful when previous data came from a study without placebo group. And keep in mind that the stock had already gone up more than 200% in just a month. So in a situation like this, no placebo, no recent data, a CEO change, a massive pre-data rally, that's where you need to play it safe. As usual, Twitter has a full of noise and hate, and some people try to buy the dip since the company still had a lot of cash. After the initial crash, the stock bounced temporarily, giving quick trades a chance to profit. But timing that perfectly is hard. You basically need to be glued to your skin at a market opening, and that's way too stressful for me. Still, some people succeed, so kudos to them. And that, my friend, is biotech. One of the companies that had been a favorite in this user's yearly Twitter poll ended up crashing to the bottom at the very last moment. You can see it clearly. Almost everything is in red. And finally, let's talk about IO Biotech, which dropped 77%. And get this, the month before, in August, it had already fallen 47%, but don't recover. So what happened this time? Let's break it down. IO Biotech was running a phase 3 trial for melanoma. In August, they announced they could release their data the next day, which often sounds like good news because companies usually don't announce the announcement if the results are bad. But the next day, the results come out and they miss statistical significance with a p-value of 0.056. Now let me pause here for a second. That number might look close to 0.05, which is the usually threshold for success. So companies start saying things like, there is a trend, it narrowly missed significance, but come on, if it's not below 0.05, it doesn't pass. That's it. Don't let them sugarcoat it. Those are the standards regulators require. Anyway, the stock dropped 50% the next day, but then rebound a few days later. Why? Because then, a few days later, they released their financial report, and they also said they would meet with the FDA to discuss the next step toward a potential approval request. So, since the data were close, investors still had some hope, and the market reacted with that optimism. But remember, if it doesn't meet 0.05 threshold, there is nothing to do, generally. So, for those holding the stock here, that little rebound was like a gift from heaven, a last chance to exit before things got worse. So the takeaway here is clear. Whenever you can read words like trend, narrow miss, almost significant, we are going to discuss with the FDA, okay, it's time to find your best exit point. So that's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed these lessons and that they helped you avoid those brutal minus 80% in biotech crash. See you next time. Bye.